Beis of Tanya. Abbas Yisrael. Actually, my favorite thing is to teach topics not that people don't know, but the topics that people think they know. And Perek Lamed Beis, sometimes, what do you say, familiarity breeds contempt. Yeah, we know Perek Lamed Beis. Perek Lamed Beis is such an awesome, incredible, deep, life-changing Perek, teaching us about relationships. And we're going to take a deep dive into Perek Lamed Beis today. So, Perek Lamed Beis, why are we talking about Abbas Yisrael right now? We're talking about atzvus and simcha. We're talking about negative emotions and positive emotions for the last few lessons, and that's where we are in Tanya. Tanya Prakim Chavav through Lamed Dalet is all about atzvus and simcha. So first it talks about atzvus and how to get rid of negative emotions, then it moves on to simcha, and then plunk stuck in the middle of there's a whole perek about Abbas Yisrael. What's the connection? So we're going to find it out later on in today's class. How Perek Lamed Beis enters over here in the middle of the topic of simcha. But even on a very practical level, although Rebbe doesn't say this, an argument can be made that there are many different sources of atzvus in our life. There are many different sources of negative emotions. And I do think that it's fair to say that a large portion of our negative emotions come from relationships. Difficulty in relationships, difficulty having and maintaining healthy and happy relationships. So in that way also it connects to the topic that we're talking about, although that's not the connection that Rebbe makes, but I think that's also a fair connection to make. Okay, let us start today on page 225. And I'm going to start with a question. And the question is, theoretically, are any two random people capable of having a good relationship with each other? Or put it in different words, are any two people compatible and are able to have a wonderful, beautiful, nice relationship? What do you guys think? Not necessarily. Okay? Anyone disagree? Anyone thinks that the answer would be yes? Sorry?
Like fundamentally, or like practical, if they just meet out of the blue?
In other words, obviously it'll take some time to get to know each other, and there's work, but any two people, given time, effort, and enough able to get to know each other, they're compatible and they can have a wonderful, great relationship with each other. Is that a correct or incorrect statement? True or false? You're saying false, and I think that you're correct. And to prove that you're correct, let's learn a little piece of Gemara over here from the Masechta Sotah. And although the topic over there is about marriage and the relationship between a man and a woman, but as we'll see, the larger idea is equally applicable to everyone. Let's see what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that heaven matches a woman to a man only according to his deeds. In the Hebrew, Ein mezavkin le, this is page 225. Ein mezavkin le la'adam isha elo lefi ma'asav. And therefore, it is as difficult to successfully match a couple as it was to split the Red Sea when rescuing the Jews from Egypt. As it is stated, Hashem settles solitary individuals together in a home. Hashem moishiv yichidim baisa. He brings out those who are imprisoned in chains. Meitzi asirim bakisharis. So what do we have over here? That when Hashem took the Yidden out, the Yidden who were imprisoned in chains, and took them to the Yam Suf, that's the same thing as settling solitary individuals together in a home. So therefore, for Hashem to make a shidduch is as difficult as Kriyas Yam Suf. So the Gemara asks, is that true? Didn't Rabbi Yehuda say in the name of Rav that 40 days before an embryo was formed, so a baskel, a divine voice declares, this woman is destined to marry this man? Nevertheless, the original statement is not problematic, for the latter teaching speaks of a first marriage, whereas the former statement speaks of a second marriage. Okay, so what we have over here is, and this is a complicated topic all for itself, which we're not going to get into tonight because it's not the topic, which is the idea of a bashert. And we know the Zohar tells us that the neshama of a husband and the neshama of a wife are two half of the neshamas, they share a neshama together, and that's first marriage. And therefore that's something which is determined before the man and the woman are born. And that's very important, because since it's before they're born, so that means that their behavior has actually no impact on it whatsoever, because before someone's born, we don't know what their behavior is going to be, because we have free choice. So the first marriage, it's not dependent on myself, it's not dependent on the deeds of the person, it's a neshama thing. The second marriage, however, the Gemara says, is as difficult, because Hashem has to match up people according to their behaviors, so therefore it's as difficult for Hashem to match up these people as it is Kriyas Yam Suf. So, page 226, the question that we have, does this teaching from the Gemara shed light on the question of compatibility between random individuals? Does it shed light? And if yes, how?
Because if it's according to their Meisim, then it's very hard.
Right. So let's see how and actually what this tells us is that people are not compatible, and in fact to find two people are compatible is as difficult as Kriyas Yamsuf. Why? So let's see how the Maharal explains this in the Chilushi Agados Maharal, text 1b, page 227. Successfully pairing a couple is as difficult as splitting the Red Sea. It requires a tremendous feat to split an entity that is intrinsically one, such as the sea, into two distinct parts. It is a similarly spectacular feat to join two entities that are in essence distinct. The quoted pasuk says, Hashem settles yichidim, solitary individuals together in a home. The term yichidim implies singularity. Each is utterly dissimilar and distinct from the other. Nevertheless, Hashem settles them together and merges them into a single entity. Just as sea splitting sunders something indivisibly singular, so it is equally challenging to create a unified entity out of entities that are as essentially distinct as a man and a woman. In addition, splitting the Yamsuf contradicted the laws of nature. Similarly, pairing couples is entirely unnatural, for by nature they are distinct to the point that pairing and uniting requires supernatural input. In fact, there's a sikha from the Rebbe where the Rebbe explains, and look at the sikhas Chelakei, that for this reason, because it requires a koyach which is higher than teva even to keep together a man and a woman, because essentially they're two separate beings, therefore a marriage requires a constant force that's holding them together. Similar, by the way, to Kriyas Yamsuf, when there was a wind that had to blow constantly to keep the water separated. The same thing is there requires a constant, that's why we, as anyone who here is married knows, that marriage requires constant maintenance because there's that unnaturalness. And what does that unnaturalness come from? The fact that human beings intrinsically and essentially are egotistical beings, meaning that every single one of them are based in self-interest, and everyone has their own desires, their own interests, their own needs, their own goals, and to get two people together, there's a miracle. To get two people together that are actually compatible is a miracle. So that is true, obviously, in terms of marriage. And when it comes to marriage, obviously, we're talking about a relationship which is, encompasses almost every single sphere of a person's life. So therefore, it's much more blatant over there. So, for example, your work buddy, you see him a few hours a day, and if he annoys you, right? But ultimately, the same concept applies to any two human beings. We are all yichidim. Every single one of us is a full world, a full individual, olam male, with all of everything about us. And to find someone that fits like a Lego, like two Legos, is obviously something which is very difficult. So then the question becomes, obviously, then how do we have relationships? How do we maintain relationships with other people? So this sounds like a very deep question, but I'm assuming that everyone here in this room has relationships with other people. So how do you do it? How do you manage it? If you're not essentially compatible with another person, how do you manage it? And the answer is, that how do we manage it? We find common ground. As different as I and you may be, there is something that we have in common. Do you like sushi?
No.
You don't? Okay. We say, so I also don't like sushi. We have something in common. No. Right? Do you enjoy sports? Okay. Someone else over here who's can volunteer to, you like learning Gemara?
Sometimes.
Okay. Okay, then we're on the same page. I also like learning sometimes Gemara. Okay. So you find someone that there's common ground that you have with another person, and then you enjoy that. You both enjoy music, you both enjoy a certain type of food, you both have a certain ideal, a certain value, and what you basically do is, if that's important to you, that's your priority, then if the common area that I have and you have are both areas that are very important in my life, then everything else becomes less important, and we can focus on our relationship with each other. So that's one way of having a relationship. Another way, and this is more specifically when we're talking about a relationship between men and women, is that there can be a appeal. Two people are attracted to each other, which is obviously a very superficial type of relationship. So we have here, you can have a relationship because of common ground. You can have a relationship because of even a more superficial appeal that a person has. And as the Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, neither of these are the basis for a very lasting relationship. The famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, text 2, page 228. Kol ava she'tluya b'davar. Any love that is dependent on something, when the thing ceases, the love also ceases. But a love that is not dependent on anything never ceases. What is an example of love that is dependent on something? That is the love of Amnon for Tamar. And what is an example of a love that is not dependent on anything? That is the love of David and Yonasan. Okay, so the Mishnah over here is making mention of two different stories. Both of them occurred in the same time period. The first one, the story of Amnon and Tamar, is, David HaMelech, he had many children from different wives, and he had a daughter whose name was Tamar, and he had a son from a different wife, so it was a half-brother, whose name was Amnon. And this Amnon was utterly infatuated and very much attracted to his half-sister. So one day he pretended to be sick, and he requested her help, and when she arrived, he raped her. Following that, he lost all his interest in her and is so disgusted by her. I guess she lost, for whatever reason, now that he had his way with her, she lost her appeal in his eyes, and he actually despised her. Terrible story. We're told the story anyways for the different lessons that we have from it. We also know that Amnon didn't get away with it. Tamar's full brother, Avshalom, ended up killing Amnon to avenge his sister's honor. And also, we have an everlasting halacha that comes from that, the halacha of yichud pnuya, the idea of that you're not allowed to be together in the same room with a woman, even if she's a pnuya, even if she's not married, comes from there. But as we know, Torah doesn't, Spiros is not only nice bedtime stories. So that's one story that we have, and that's a typical story of Ava Shitli B'Davar. It was a love that was dependent upon something, a very external something, attraction. That attraction went away, that love went away. By the way, it's interesting is that today when you talk about, you say that he loved her, and most people would say the word love isn't correct. You'd say more, maybe he lusted her, he desired her. But in Hebrew, the word ava is applies equally. So the word ava shitli b'davar, but that's the word that's used. Then you have another incident which happened a little earlier with David HaMelech. That we know that David HaMelech was a son-in-law of Shaul, and he served Shaul HaMelech. And at a certain point in time, Shaul got very jealous of David, assuming, and in hindsight correctly, that David is going to be the next king. And actually Shaul made several attempts on David's life. And the one who, on several occasions, rescued David was Yonasan. And the irony of it is that Yonasan was the crown prince. So Yonasan is busy standing up for the person who he knows is going to be the king and going to sit on what you might want to say is rightfully his throne. And obviously that's a ava she'eidetli b'davar. This is a love which wasn't dependent on anything. To the contrary, it's an irrational, illogical love, the deepest love possible, and that is the kind of love which lasts forever. So in life we have the same thing. Most of us, I think that when we're talking about relationships, we have an ava which is tliya b'davar. Why do I have a relationship with someone? Why do I like someone? There's so if it's the common ground, then the common ground is the davar. That's the thing which my relationship is based on. I don't really love the person. I love that area. So what if, for example, one day you decide that you start liking sushi, and I still don't like sushi, so that's it. Our relationship is gone. What if one day you decide you want to learn Gemara all day instead of sometimes? Okay, so once again, we're incompatible anymore. But there's something else. Even if our common ground continues, then ultimately, what if one day there's something that becomes more important to me than that common ground? Now, this is a very big, shluchim have to deal with a lot. When people come, Rahman al-Islam, they want to intermarry. Right? So what do the shluchim try to tell them? There are obviously many different things, but one of the things they tell them is that right now, religion isn't very important to you, because you're 23 and stupid. And to you, right now, they don't say those words. But if you look at the statistics, it turns out that once you're going to have kids, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, suddenly it's going to become very important to you. So right now, the fact that you're a Yid and she's a Christian doesn't seem to you to be a big obstacle because you have so much common ground. And the area which you don't have in common, which is the area of religion, doesn't seem to be very important to you. But what if one day your common ground remains common ground, but the areas which are uncommon, or non-common, or whatever you want to call it, suddenly they become very important, then that relationship fails also. So Ava She'eidetli b'davar is inherently an unstable relationship because it's based on this common ground, or the appeal, which can disappear at any single day. And even if it doesn't disappear, there could be other things. Now we all know that there are many relationships which are tliya b'davar, which are based on something which lasts. But that requires constant work, and also a constant suppression. You're really suppressing all those areas of incompatibility because there are no two people who are compatible in all areas. So to make the relationship work, what you're doing is you're suppressing all the areas of incompatibility in order to be able to have the relationship. So that's the way relationships work, practically speaking. I know we kind of hyper-analyze it, but if you go into the world, what is a relationship? You find another person, you find common ground with that person, and then you hope that that common ground remains, and you put in a lot of work on staying focused on on that common ground, and make sure that all the other areas don't become a huge obstacle to the relationship. The question is, can we come up with a better model for relationships? And the answer is yes, and that's what Dr. Rebbe is going to give us in Perek Beis and Tanya. You know, something that we've been talking about from the very beginning of this course, we introduced it already in the first lesson, is that the most foundational idea in Tanya is the idea of shtei nefashos, that every single one of us has two nefashos, nefesh elokis, nefesh hamas, and everything in Tanya is actually based on this foundation of nefesh elokis versus nefesh hamas. What we've done in the last 5 lessons, we found out that when we're talking about atzvus and simcha, although the nefesh hamas might seem, it's like your old shoe, which is very comfortable, but it's torn, and every time you walk in it, your feet is hurting, but you don't want to get rid of it because how comfortable it is. That's your nefesh hamas. It's very comfortable, but it's hurting you. And all the atzvus comes from your nefesh hamas identity. And the inability to experience true simcha also comes from your nefesh hamas identity. And now we're going to find out that the same is true about Ahavas Yisrael, that we can't have, Ahavas Yisrael is not, forget about the word Ahavas Yisrael is a fancy word. Relationships, real relationships, is a function of the nefesh elokis, not a function of the nefesh hamas. Let me ask you all a question. We know that the world is constantly spinning on its axes. Actually, just this week, someone forwarded to me from Rabbi Broin, and asked the Rav, someone asked him, does the world spin on its axes? And he said there are different, apparently conflicting answers from the Rebbe on this, and obviously we have to understand how to resolve the conflict, but there's quite a few answers where the Rebbe is like very obviously, yes, the world is spinning on its axes. You all know what that means, right? And if you spin a ball, there's one area on the top and one area on the bottom, which is not spinning, and the ball is spinning around it. So, where is the world spinning around? Where's the axis? Where's that one point where the world is spinning around? Anyone knows? No one knows. What? Eretz Yisrael, you're saying what? The North Pole. North Pole and South Pole. You're all wrong. Right here. Where I am. The world is spinning around me. You disagree with me? It's spinning around you. And that's why me and you can't have a relationship. Because you are wrong. You are so wrong. You could leave. It's not a joke. Everything that I experience is about me. I'm about me. And everything that I experience, I am thinking about in terms of its impact on me. And like, you guys are all foolish enough to think that I'm here in order to teach you. No. You're all here to listen to me. Right? From my perspective, your function is your students. And every single, everything is viewed, the whole world is spinning around me, and everything, I am at the center of everything.
Spinning out of control.
Sorry?
That's like you're spinning out of control.
Possible. But that's the Metzias. So, can I love you? Can I really like you? It's really hard to love you when inherently you're at odds with me, you're in conflict with me, because you're living this lie thinking that the world spins around you, when in actuality it's really spinning around me. You woke up today, for example, right? The truth, when you woke up today, what's your name? Mandy. Did you wake up this morning and think, oh, Rabbi Silberberg's probably hungry and maybe he wants a coffee? That's what I woke up thinking. Why didn't you think that way? If you had your head on straight and you'd realize the world is spinning around me, you wouldn't be thinking about silly you, you'd be thinking about me, right? And instead you're thinking, so I woke up this morning thinking that I'm hungry and I want a coffee. You woke up this morning thinking, whatever, right? It's not a detail where we're off from each other. There is nothing we have in common. There is no experience that we have in common. To use an example, you like ice cream. What kind?
Mix.
Mixed. Okay. I also like mixed ice cream. So let's say me and you, we went to Sweet Expressions. And we both ordered ice creams. I ordered a mixed ice cream and you ordered a mixed ice cream. We sat down, we're eating. Are we enjoying the same thing? No. You know why? Because you don't like ice cream. And I don't like ice cream. You know the famous story about the fish? Famous story about there's a fisherman, so Mashal who catches a fish, beautiful big pike. He looks at it and says, "Ah, look at this pike. The Paritz loves pike. I have to take this pike to the Paritz." So he takes the fish and sticks it into his cooler bag with ice, and he's taking it. The fish has a hook stuck in its mouth and it's bleeding and it's grasping for air or whatever, however, and it's obviously it's having a panic attack. But it heard that the guy said that he's taking it to the Paritz, and the Paritz loves pike. He's like, oh, Baruch Hashem, at least, okay, if I can just survive until I get to the Paritz. The Paritz loves pike, he loves me. So the Paritz certainly has in his backyard, he has a pond, a pike pond, where he's going to put me, and there's a lot of toys, he's going to make sure to feed me because he loves pike, he loves me, right? And they get to the palace, the fisherman gets to the palace, and the guard is over there, and the guy, oh, what are you doing here? I have a pike, open up, let me see it. Whoa, take it in straight to the Paritz loves pike. The fish is almost dead, but the anticipation. Anyways, comes to the Paritz, presents the pike. The Paritz, oh, look at that. I love pike. Do me a favor, take it to the kitchen and tell the chef to chop it up and to roast it and to fry it and to mix it with onions, and I'm eating it for supper tonight. And with his dying breath, the fish screams out and says, you liar, you don't love pike, you love yourself. Because if you loved the pike, you wouldn't eat it. You don't love ice cream, you love yourself. In fact, what do you really love? Do you walk into a store and look at the ice cream and say, oh, I love you? You like ice cream? No, you don't like ice cream. What do you like? Let's be a little more specific. What do you like?
Yourself.
You like eating ice cream. And very specific. Do you like when he eats ice cream? No. So you love yourself and you like when you... So we're both sitting together. Kaviyachol, it seems like we're both enjoying the same thing, but no, I'm enjoying the sensations in my taste buds. You're enjoying the sensations in your taste bud. Because we can't enjoy the same thing. Why? Because of our inherent conflict about where the world is spinning around. To put it in different words, if I'm to love you, I only love you because you help me enjoy myself better. Yeah, I'm enjoying this time. You know why? Because it's better to sit with someone who has the same their selfishness is channeled in the same way, and we can talk about it. I don't love you. I love the way I feel when you're in my presence. I love myself. So can I really have a relationship with you? What kind of joke is that? So before I even say hello to you, we're at odds with each other. We have a completely different worldview. But what if, that's all the Nefesh Bahamis. But what if I were to turn to your Nefesh Elokis and say, Nefesh Elokis, where does the world spin around? What does your Nefesh Elokis answer? Nefesh Elokis says the world spins around Hashem. Hashem is in the middle, Hashem is the axis, and all of us, and everything, Anina Vresi. So my Nefesh Elokis says the world is spinning around Hashem, your Nefesh Elokis says the world is spinning around Hashem, your Nefesh Elokis says it, your Nefesh Elokis says it. We're all on the same boat. Can we have a relationship? Why not? We're on the same page. We're on the 100% the same page. Every single one of us has the exact same goal and mission. The Nefesh Bahamis, every one of our Nefesh Bahamis is essentially detached from each other. When the Rebbe says in Tanya that Haguf and Mechulakim, the bodies are separated. So when you're 7 years old and you learn that Pedic, you think, what does it mean that my bodies are separated? 3D, spatially, my body's here, your body's there. It's much deeper than where my body is. Our bodies are inherently separated by their identity. The Nefesh Elokis are not separated by their identity. They all have the exact same identity, which is serving Hashem. And furthermore, as the Alter Rebbe says, at the source, every single Nefesh Elokis Taka is Achim Mamish, they're all one. So number one, the Nefesh Bahamis is an impediment to relationships, because every Nefesh Bahamis is focused on themselves. And the nefesh elikis, on the other hand, is the ultimate possibility for having a real relationship. Is through the nefesh elikis. Let's see how the Rebbe says this inside. Sorry? Yeah, because my nefesh hamis doesn't care about you. Mitzad nefesh hamis, in other words, it doesn't mean that really. What do you mean two nefesh elikis? We're both one, but I'm saying it's the power of two.
But it's also to nefesh b'amis, but it's not to nefesh because you don't care about it.
Because you don't care. My nefesh hamis doesn't care about you. It only cares about itself. It can't care about you. Yeah. So text 4 from Perek Aleph. Acting on the suggestion mentioned above, and we're going to talk about that a little later. What that means. What is the suggestion mentioned above? To view one's body with scorn and contempt, and to find joy in the joy of the neshama alone, is a direct and easy way to fulfill the mitzvah of v'ahavta l'reacha kamecha, toward every soul of Israel, from the greatest to the smallest. Which, by the way, the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael, l'reacha kamecha, is the strangest mitzvah that there is. How? I have to love every single yid like I love myself. Let me ask you a question. Who do you love like you love yourself? Anyone?
No.
What? No one. Sometimes I hear parents say their children. But other than that, pretty much no one. It's impossible to love someone else like you love yourself. And even parents who love their children like they love themselves is because children are myself. And here's the Torah saying, I have to love every single yid, no matter their personality, kamecha, like I love myself. From the perception of the nefesh hamis, it's absolutely impossible. But if we move to nefesh elikis, that's how it happens. Because beside the nefesh elikis, it is kamecha. We are all one, and there isn't that division in terms of goals and aspirations. Weiter. For physical and material considerations, no longer erect barriers between us. In other words, once we prioritize and identify with the nefesh elikis, all these gashmistic things, they don't separate between us, because we disdain and loathe the body. The body's not important to us. And as for spiritual disparities caused by variations in the soul and spirit, well, who can even know the true greatness and worth as they are rooted and sourced in the living God? Moreover, all neshamas are truly equal, all have one father, to the point that all yidden are referred to as actual brothers. Because of the single source of the neshamas, the one Hashem, it is only our bodies that separate us. Consequently, those who prioritize their bodies while considering their neshamas to be less significant cannot experience true love and brotherhood. They can only experience love that is contingent on non-essential factors. So the bottom line is, we make our choice. And that's really the biggest choice in Tanya. Nefesh elikis versus nefesh hamis. Who am I? Am I about myself or am I about Hashem? If I am about myself, then anyone who's a contradiction to me, I can't have a relationship with them. But if I'm not about myself, then can you shtech me? Can you hurt me? If I'm not about me, how can you hurt me? I'm about serving the Eibusher. And therefore, but it's not that all Yidden can have Avos Yisrael. This is such an incredible change in paradigm, and the reason why is because what the Rebbe is telling us over here is that the key to having relationships, the most powerful, essential relationships with other Yidden, is not the way you look at them. It's the way you look at yourself. It all begins within yourself. The other person doesn't matter. If you view yourself as a guf, then every relationship you're going to have is going to be at best a ava hatliya b'davar, because that's the only kind of relationship that your body knows, the nefesh hamis knows. But the moment you start making that transition, and you become a more of a neshamadika person, and your life is about Hashem and serving the Eibusher, suddenly all relationships are improved and enhanced and become amazing, and not because your perception of the other person changed, but because the perception of yourself changed. Text 5, we have this. Rabbi Yochanan writes, if my primary identity is the I, my sense of tangible being, then I cannot experience true unity with my fellows. However, if my life and sense of self are in accordance with my essential identity, my neshama, then I love my fellow just as I love myself, literally, because the other isn't another. He or she is me. As a result, the more I sense myself, the greater the barrier to me and my fellows. And conversely, the more I sense my neshama, the more I will love others. And that is why the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael is the one mitzvah which is the most reflective and expressive of a person's general spiritual state. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. What we have over here is a very fundamental approach to relationships, which is very different. When we're talking before about Nefesh Bahamis relationships, and that is built on common ground, so we said, so I have common ground, and the area which we don't have in common, so I work hard to suppress them or to minimize them. Mitzad the Nefesh Elokis, I'm not suppressing or minimizing anything. Those things aren't important. Those things are not what I value. What I value is Ruchnius, Neshama, Hashem. And therefore automatically, all the things that are an impediment to the relationship with Nefesh Bahamis are not an impediment when I'm talking about a relationship with the Nefesh Elokis. So how many of you over here are busy thinking, hey, so my relationships, are they talking real relationships? Are they maybe Ava Tluya B'davar? Maybe I have to start anew. Maybe I have to dump all of my, anyone who I have a relationship with today.
Why should your Nefesh Elokis love somebody else's Nefesh Bahamis?
Who said they do?
I mean, I get it.
They don't.
They love their Nefesh Elokis.
Yeah.
But if that guy's Nefesh Bahamis is revealed, so what one-sided love?
We're going to have to address that a little later. No, but we will address that. But the point here is, when you're looking at another person, you're seeing a mirror. If you see yourself as Nefesh Bahamis, then you see the Nefesh Bahamis in another person. I remember back in the day, I was a young bacher. One day in Yeshiva appears someone with a very big birthmark, very big birthmark. I remember the first time that I see this guy, I'm like talking to the birthmark. You know what I'm talking about? It's like you don't, it's like, it's in your face. I got to know the person better, became friends with him. A few months later, one day I'm talking, I realized that I haven't noticed the birthmark in a long time. Because I'm talking to the person, not the guf. If someone calls you up for a shidduch resume, says, tell me a little about Moshe Chaim. Are you going to say, oh, Moshe Chaim, oh, you want to know? I'll tell you all about him. He's 6 foot tall, his blue eyes, his beard is blonde, he weighs kach v'kach. Okay, there you have all your information. Is that what you would do? You wouldn't. That's not the person. The person is not the guf. Who's the person? You start talking about their mitzvahs, you talk about who they are. My point is, so a person has a Nefesh Bahamis. But if you identify as Nefesh Elokis and that's what's important to you, then that's what you identify in the other person. When you're looking at the other person, you're seeing the birthmark, you're seeing Nefesh Bahamis, that's because it's a reflection on yourself. But what about if we have relationships and they're messed up? They're not the way they should be. So let's see the fascinating sikha from the Rebbe, where the Rebbe looks into the Mishnah about Amnon and Tamar and David and Yonasan and gives a very, very interesting hero from it. Let's do text 6. Chazal tell us about the case of Amnon and Tamar, and they use it as an example of love based on specific considerations. In truth, there was an essential love present in that case as well, because Amnon and Tamar were siblings. As close family members, they should have experienced a closeness for each other that was not tluya b'davar. Nevertheless, the love expressed in that incident was dependent on a consideration, namely physical beauty. As a result, when the reason for that contingent love was removed, the love vanished altogether, taking the natural sibling bond along with it. This demonstrates that the critical factor is not the origins of the love, but rather the form that the love assumes at the present moment. The Rebbe's medayik. It doesn't say Ava haboa midavar or Ava hatluya b'davar. Ava b'davar means where did it originate? Tluya means what is it dependent on right now? And let's look the other way around. Our sages then cite the case of David and Yonasan, which presents an opposite scenario, because the love between them was originally an external relationship, a friendship. They weren't brothers. Despite that, we observe that once the bond deepened to the point that it became an essential love, the pasuk describes it as a bond of soul to soul. Nafshi kshura benafshi. It even affected Yonasan's kingship, for he readily gave up his role as the future king to David. And despite all the greatness associated with monarchy, he abdicated in favor of David because his love was an essential one, not tluya b'davar, ava atzmus. This illustrates the opposite extreme. They were originally attracted to each other's specific qualities, For one cannot love a person instantaneously upon first meeting. Genuine bonding is a process. The parties must first become acquainted, then sit down to talk. And eventually they can develop a relationship to the point that it is no longer reliant on particular considerations, for even a non-essential love can blossom into a non-dependent love. Very deep idea. This is sort of Rebbe's style. So the Mishnah brings a mashal, right? A mashal of this love is David and Yonasan, and the mashal of this love is Amnon and Tamar. And the question you can ask is, and if the Mishnah didn't give us a mashal, the Mishnah just told us a love that's dependent upon something doesn't last, a love that's not dependent on something will last. What wouldn't we understand? Why do we have, what does the mashal add? And the Rebbe says the mashal adds a ton. The mashal adds so much, because talk about reverse situations. Amnon and Tamar, what are we talking about? We're talking about the advantage of essential love. Amnon and Tamar were siblings. They had that love. They had essential love. But then came in other factors, Tluya B'davar. And therefore, because their love eventually, or at least Amnon's love for Tamar became one, which was primarily because of Tluya B'davar, once it went away, everything went away. The whole thing went away. And the opposite with David and Yonasan. They didn't have essential love. They didn't start that way. They weren't siblings. But nevertheless, it developed into a case of essential love, which tells us that in our relationships today, it's not about how our relationship started, it's about where it is today, or even more importantly, where it'll be tomorrow. We can work on our relationships and improving them, and get even a relationship which started off as a Tluya B'davar, started off because of common ground, or even if it started off only because of appeal and attraction, it can eventually, we can move it to a higher level of relationship, the more that we turn and become more nefesh l'kis people. Now, something interesting about Perek Lamed Beis, which some people know, the Rebbe has spoken about this, is that in the original Tanya, Perek Lamed Beis doesn't appear. We know that the Rebbe worked for Tanya in 20 years, and during that time, Tanya was released originally in booklet form, not printed, not published, but the Alter Rebbe would write it up, and then it was given to scribes, and they this was before the days of home printers and shipping centers and copy centers and postmarket. And it was distributed amongst the Chassidim a few chapters at a time in booklets, which is called Kuntresim. And then eventually the Alter Rebbe, for different reasons beyond the scope of our conversation today, the Alter Rebbe decides he's printing Tanya. That was in the year 1796. The Alter Rebbe is printing Tanya. And before the Alter Rebbe published the Tanya, he went over all of his entire manuscript, revised it. So the Tanya we have today is the Madura Basra. It's the second version of the Tanya. It's revised. And most of it is very similar, especially in Kutei Amarim. If you go in other parts of Tanya, maybe there's a bigger difference in the first version and the second version, Kutei Amarim. However, there are a few pieces that are added in, and one of the major pieces that the Alter Rebbe added in to the Madura Basra is Perek Lamed Beis of Tanya, which means in the original Tanya, before it was published, the original manuscript, it didn't have Perek Lamed Beis. It went directly from Perek Lamed Aleph to Perek Lamed Gimel. I mean, obviously there was a Perek Lamed Beis, but I'm saying in the current number, which is curious, because Tanya is built as a very tight structure, and every Perek builds on the Perek beforehand. It kind of raises the question: if Tanya needed Perek Lamed Beis, why wasn't it in the original version? If it didn't need Perek Lamed Beis, why was it added? And obviously Tanya has a structure which has integrity without Perek Lamed Beis, because again, the original Tanya didn't have it. So why was it added? Now, if you take a look in Tanya, you'll notice the whole Perek Lamed Beis is taken one big parenthesis. Because as mentioned at the beginning of class, the larger topic is the topic of Atzvus and Simcha, the topic of negative emotions and positive emotions. And in Perek Lamed Aleph, the Alter Rebbe says that the way to arrive at Simcha, and this is what we spoke about in last week's class, the Alter Rebbe says the way we arrive at Simcha is by Nafshei Ikar and Gufei Tafel. The more you prioritize your neshama, and the more you deprioritize your body, your guf, the greater your capacity for Simcha. Or to put it in some different words, Simcha is a natural byproduct of living a life identified with the neshama. Then the Alter Rebbe takes a break, and he adds in, almost like a parenthesis, Perek Lamed Beis. He says that based on what we said earlier, I want you to know that when you make nafshei ikar gufei tafel, when you prioritize your neshama, and when you deprioritize your guf, there's a second benefit. And the second benefit is Avos Yisrael, because Avos Yisrael is a neshama function. We finished the Perek and we went back to the topic of Simcha. So it's a parenthesis. And this is the most powerful thing. Think about it for a second. Essentially what Dr. Rebbe is telling us is, you look at Musa's farm. So you have first, Ben Adam Lamakim, right? Okay, here's how do I serve Hashem. And here's all the things I need to work on in my relationship with Hashem. Okay, now let's flip the page. Let's talk about Ben Adam L'Chavere. Let's talk about my relationship with others. In Tanya, there's no such thing. Tanya is being Adam Lamakim. In other words, the whole Tanya is avodah of prioritizing your nefesh l'kis, living on a Shama life. And then Avos Yisrael, that's a natural byproduct. Because if you live a neshama life, again, we're all spinning in harmony together with each other. Ki yishacha b'leivacha. Avos Yisrael is not, in the Tanya way of looking at it, is not really an avodah on its own. It's a result, it's an outcome. An outcome of living in a Shamadik life, which is the whole Tanya is all about. Which, by the way, leads you to an incredible conclusion. You see a person, a fruma person, a chassidish person, davens b'avodah, and you see that person doesn't have Avos Yisrael, then you are justified in saying that that person is on one big ego trip and missing the point of everything. Not he's missing Avos Yisrael, he's missing the point of everything. Because if there is no Avos Yisrael, that means that it's Gufa Yikar V'Nafshi Tofel. The guy didn't get the Aleph Beis of Chassidus. The Aleph Beis of Chassidus is to live a life which is identified with the Neshama. And if, you know, what the Hayom Yom of Chesov, right, what they say over there, that what's the point of the whole Chassidus and everything, if we don't have Avos Yisrael? Yeah, that's what Perek Lamed Beis says. The whole point of Chassidus is to get you to a place of Nafshi Yikar Gufa Tofel. To a place where your nefesh is the main thing and you go for the secondary. And if you don't have Avos Yisrael, you missed the point. Go back to go, right? How do you say? And start again, because you're missing everything. Avos Yisrael is the result of your avodah, and if you don't have Avos Yisrael, you don't have the avodah. So Dr. Rebbe didn't have to put in Perek Lamed Beis, because Avos Yisrael is not an independent avodah. Adarabah, it's a mistake to think that Avos Yisrael is independent avodah. Oh, I see you. I don't like you. Okay, I'm going to start working myself on liking you. You know, I don't like blue shirts. I'm working myself to like blue shirts. No. Obviously, so it's not even about the way I look at you. It's the way I look at myself. It's about becoming an neshama person. No. So why Taki did Dr. Rebbe put in the Perek Lamed Beis? L'chayr is Taka parentheses, which is unnecessary. If you get Tanya, you'll have Avos Yisrael. If you don't get Tanya, you're not going to have Avos Yisrael. So the Rebbe spoke about this in a Sikh and Tafshan Aleph, and let's read what the Rebbe says. Text 7. As evidence from the original manuscripts, chapter 32 of Tanya, Perek Lamed Beis, which explains the concept of Avos Yisrael, did not exist in the Tanya's original draft. Rather, the text flowed uninterrupted from what is now chapter 31 directly into what is now chapter 33. Only in the final draft, the printed edition of the Tanya, did Dr. Rebbe insert chapter 32 to explain the concept of Avos Yisrael. Everything occurs by Hashgacha Pratis. Since the process by which this Perek was included was made known to us, it must provide us with a message and directive, Vahira. Namely, the Chassidus demands tremendous emphasis on Avos Yisrael. Someone might assume that Avos Yisrael doesn't need to be overly emphasized in every situation, as indicated by the initial draft of Tanya, not devoting a Perek to the topic. This seemingly implies that the Tanya can be studied appropriately without focusing on Avos Yisrael. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe pointedly included this topic in his later version, the final version, and the final conclusion is binding. By doing so, the Alter Rebbe absolutely negates this misunderstanding, clarifying that it is unthinkable not to emphasize Avos Yisrael at all times. Ist der die dort kein Art und kein Kosake Daitach Klal Klal. What do you say? That Avos Yisrael has to be bad Goshe b'chol makom u'makom. In other words, Alter Rebbe is saying, I didn't put in Avos Yisrael in Tanya. Someone who understands, looks at it and realizes it didn't have to be put in because it's a natural outcome. But 90% of the people are going to look at Tanya and going to say, hey, take a look at that. Alter Rebbe didn't put in Tanya, Avos Yisrael in Tanya. It must be, it's not a Chabad thing. Yeah, that's what the Pelishers do. In Lakewood, the snacks, they have Avos Yisrael, right? It's not in Tanya. Idiot. It's not in Tanya because it doesn't need to be in Tanya. Alter Rebbe was worried. Alter Rebbe, no. He says, no, I'm putting it and making a paydik on it. So no one can chas v'shalom make a mistake to think that obviously Yisrael doesn't have to be emphasized at every single occasion. Very powerful idea. The Rebbe is saying, wherever it is, at any occasion, obviously Yisrael always has to be about Gosha. No one can ever think that obviously Yisrael doesn't have to be emphasized on every single occasion. So, how about hating other Yidden? Is that fine? Midiraisa. What? Not allowed to hate another Yid. Why not? Okay, when you say because it says in Torah, that's always the easy answer. That's we're holding by the Nishma. So you're saying that I have to be a neshama Yid. Okay, if I'm a neshama Yid and you're gonna come over to me after class and say, Rabbi Silberberg, that was the worst class I ever heard, and you have zero teaching ability. So if I'm a neshama person, I won't be hurt by that. Why? Because my neshama doesn't have an ego. But what if after class, I see you doing an Avera? If I'm a neshama person, how could I not hate you for that? Neshama is not essentially about love. Neshama is about serving the Eibishter. So I love you because you have a neshama also. But what if you're Sabbath? If I am so into serving the Eibishter and I see someone else who's sabotaging it, going the opposite of what the Eibishter wants, not my neshama. How can my neshama not hate that person? And the answer is that you have to hate that person. Let's take a look. Text 88, we have a pasuk. So if you see your enemy's donkey lying under its burden, would you refrain from helping him? No, you have to help him. What does the Torah say? You have an enemy. 1 second. Enemy. Why is Torah talking about your enemy? What should the Torah say? The Torah should say, if you see your enemy's donkey, stop hating him. Who gave you a right to hate another Yid? The Torah doesn't say that. The Torah over here is saying, yeah, enemy, that's fine, but you should still help him. So the Gemara has a question on this. The Gemara in Pesachim, text 8b, the Gemara said, what is the meaning of your enemy? Is one permitted to hate another Yid? Isn't it written, another Yid? So the Gemara says, this pasuk is talking about an instance where you saw your fellow doing an Aveira. And therefore you're allowed to hate that person. Rab Nachman by Yitzchak says, no, it's a mitzvah to hate such a person. Not you're allowed to hate a person, but if you see a person doing an Aveira, it's a mitzvah to hate him. And as the Gemara continues, brought on in Tanya, it's not enough that you have to hate the person. If you see your friend doing an Aveira, and if you have a mutual teacher, mutual Rebbe, you have to go over to the teacher and say, hello, you know, that guy, Moshe, right, Moshe Chaim, he looks like a tzaddik. I want you to know, yesterday, I saw him doing an Aveira, and therefore I hate him. So you should also hate him, because I saw him doing an Aveira. That's a chiyuv to do that. And by the way, it's not surprising. Why should it be surprising? Is it neshama about hate? Yeah. But you know what? Sometimes neshama is about love, yeah. But sometimes hate is part of love. If you love your child, and someone hurts someone loves their child, and someone goes and hurts that child, and the person is like, yeah, that's fine. I don't hate that person. You don't love your child. If I love the Eibishter, and someone is doing an Avedis, and I don't hate that person, I don't love the Eibishter. It's a joke. So befedersten, this is so important, because if my love for you is because of my neshama, that's Ahavas Yisrael, then at the same time, I'm going to be absolutely so surudert and upset when I see someone doing an Aveda. It's from the same place, the same neshama. So when you see someone with free love, you know, I love every Jew, hey, didn't Aveda, what do I care, I love every... That's not neshama, I don't know where that's coming from, but that's not Ahavas Yisrael. That's not neshama love. If neshama love, then just like the neshama loves every single yid because of the neshama, when you see a yid going and sabotaging and doing... However, comes along the Alter Rebbe and says, text 9, but even with regard to those whom one is enjoined to hate, even those people who yetaka have to hate, and which by the way, the Alter Rebbe puts a lot of limitations on it. It has to be someone who's on your level in Torah mitzvahs, and it has to be that you already tried to influence them to change and they didn't listen. It still remains the duty to love them also. And both are true. Hatred because of the wickedness in them, and love on account of the hidden good in them, the divine spark that animates their divine soul. We need to awaken Rahmanis in our hearts for the neshama, for in wicked people she's held captive by the evil. Does this answer your question? The evil and unholiness that triumphs over her, and then Rahmanis is mevatel the sin and awakens love. Now, this part of Tanya, this half of Perek on the base, is the usually ignored half of Perek on the base. In other words, most people know the first half of Perek on the base, which talks about Rabbi Yisrael. And then it's interesting is the whole second half of Perek on the base talks about this idea of mitzvah l'snoise. And yeah, the Alter Rebbe puts limits on it, very strong limits. And you could even argue that by the time the Alter Rebbe finishes, it applies to very, very few people who the mitzvah l'snoise, who you have to have mitzvah to hate. But the Alter Rebbe finds it important to talk about it in the Perek. And why does that? The Alter Rebbe could have said, love every single yid. I said somewhere that to hate, okay, that's Tosfos. So there'll be a Maimer, Memory of the Murazakim, with Alter Rebbe. Why do we have to put it in Tanya? And to me, it really adds texture to the whole Perek. Not so much Lemaisa as much as in concept. That when you say, yes, you put the meme, right? Love everyone, love every Jew, yeah. And people don't understand. It's shallow. A real Ahavas Yisrael is as deep as a neshama dika love. And by the way, you want to know, is it taka really a deep neshama dika love? Take a look at the way you react to an Avera. If you react to another person's Avera with that utter disgust, and how could you, then you know that your love for that person is a neshama dika love. And if the Avera doesn't bother you, then you really have to ask yourself, is the love from my neshama, where's that from? And I think that's today in the 21st century, that's something to be shoyl over here. The people who, yeah, it's amazing and cool, and okay, so Avedas, what's Aveda? We're all Yidden, it's all fine, Avedas. No, Avedas and Aveda. And the same neshama that has this incredible love for every single Yid is also infinitely bothered by an Aveda, and therefore does whatever it can to get a person to stop doing an Aveda. And both of these are two sides of the coin of living a neshama dika life. But with this, we finished this lesson. We also finished the course. And I think now we've seen 6 different lessons, and each one on a different topic. And the common theme in every single one of them goes back to the foundation of Tanya. Nefesh Elokis versus Nefesh Amanis. Our job here in this world, yeah, as Yidden, we follow Shulchan Aruch. But Tanya is telling us there's something much deeper than what we do. There's who we are, there's our identity. And that's the job, the work of a lifetime is trying to shift our identity from being about myself to being about the Eibishter. And when we do that, besides the fact that we're doing the right thing, that's helpful in the area of Atzvus, in the area of Simcha, in the area of Yisrael, and many other